it's one of the things that I really encourage people when I'm working with them on grief is like, grief will slow you down and it will teach you the excruciating lessons of endurance and patience. And if we can extend that to people who are grieving, that is such a gift because it is hard to know what to do. And it's hard to know what to say. And a lot of times you don't want to say and do the wrong thing, but understanding that if you can meet a person and do like one gentle, safe step at a time. What do you need? How can I best support you? And sometimes that's providing cover, or sometimes that's I suggest this to people a lot. If you can have just one person who sees eye to eye with you and understands, have them come with you to the gathering. And if you need to pull the plug, that person is cover and that person steps in and says, I'm taking so and so home. It can feel really difficult and excruciating to have to figure out how to get your needs met. But there are people who will help you, and there are people who you can trust to do this with you and journey this way with you. Welcome to the Intrepid Soul podcast, where we explore what it takes to build a human life that's congruent with your soul. I'm Katie Benway, a mystic, teacher, and author, here to walk with you through the wilds of the human experience as we get to know and get closer to the soul. Let's get curious, courageous, and conscious together. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us here at the Intrepid Soul podcast. So happy to have you back with us. And if you're new, welcome. My guest today is Jennifer Landon. Let me loop everybody in, tell everybody who you are, why we're here, what we're going to talk about. So everybody, this is Jennifer Landon. And Jennifer is a certified grief educator, a coach, and she's the founder of YGM Consulting, Your Grief Matters. Jennifer realized her compassionate calling in 2022 when a colleague tragically lost her son in a military training accident. That event set Jennifer on a transformative personal, professional, and spiritual journey to better understand grief and how it impacts people at work and in life. She's an adult mental health first aider, suicide prevention trainer, recovery-friendly workplace advocate, Reiki 2 practitioner, and a DISC behavioral analyst. Through her speaking engagements and educational programs, Jennifer helps organizations create psychologically safe and healthy workplaces where it's okay to not be okay, and where people are reminded that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Jen, that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
Yeah.
it's been a calling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not one that I expected.
And we were just chatting a little bit and reminiscing about the fact that we met each other 20 some odd years ago. And it's really funny how we met each other and how we've come full circle. I love that about life. I love that about this work, that we can know people earlier in our lives and then we go through all the kinds of transitions and rebirths we go through, and then we reconnect with people. And that kind of trust and relationship is there. And I think that's so cool. So, hi, Jen.
Hello. Yeah, I was thinking about that, Katie. It is really funny how you were kind of climbing the corporate ladder in marketing, and I was climbing the ladder in education and workforce development. And as life would happen, here we are. Right. And it was actually through a mutual friend when I started to kind of open up a little bit about my change in spirituality, I guess.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Oh, you need to read this book." And she's like, "Do you know Katie Benway?" I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So it was
Oh,
so it was so funny because I was like, I had no idea. And then of
yeah.
course I started to, fangirl you on social media and now listening
Oh,
to your podcasts and everything, and I've read the books. So, and I
that's
really
amazing.
appreciate all that you do.
Yeah. Well, so when you said, we were climbing the corporate ladder. So this is really funny because my memory, and I don't know that you remember this, Jen and I were in the Leadership Manchester program probably 20 years ago.
Yeah, at least.
And that was where we first met. And So you just said climbing the corporate ladder, and it flashed me to this memory. At our I think it was sort of like the opening retreat weekend, like, to kick off this 9-month, 12-month program, as a group, we would go away here locally in New Hampshire, but go away for a weekend, and we did this ropes course at a Boy Scout camp, and so this is my lasting memory of you. So one of the challenges in the ropes course was to be, harnessed in and someone was on the ground belaying you and you had to climb a telephone pole and then ideally you would climb to the top of the telephone pole, get on the very top and then jump off onto like a I don't know, like a one of those trapeze
Like a
things.
trapeze, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm terrified of heights, have been, from probably the moment I was born, hate heights. But it was a really powerful group bonding weekend, and I was, feeling all courageous. And so here I am in my helmet and all of the equipment, and I'm climbing up this telephone pole, and I was silently sobbing. You know, when you're, like, so scared and you're just silent, and there were just tears pouring down my face, and I was gripping the telephone pole. Later, I had bruises on the insides of my legs and arms for, like, a week because I was gripping the telephone pole, and I was, like, inching up one by one. There was no way I was ever gonna stand and jump, but I just wanted to get to the top, and you were standing, you weren't belaying me, but you were on the ground, sort of toward the bottom, and you were making eye contact with me, and I couldn't look around much farther, I was looking right at you, and I would do, like, right side, like, arm up, leg up, left side, arm up, leg up, and I'm sobbing, and you held your finger up, and you kept mouthing to me, "Just one more step, one more." That's how I got up the telephone pole, Jen.
I don't remember that, but here I am, like, bawling right now.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
what an
my
amazing
lasting
memory.
memory of you.
Oh,
Yeah. Yep, that's my memory of you, and I know that we were friends and colleagues, but,
yeah,
um, that that's, like, always my memory of you. Isn't that funny?
it is. Yeah, yeah. That was such a great experience.
Mhm, it
Yeah,
was.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
one of the things I've noticed because, like you said, I had kind of a corporate career. I was in marketing and corporate communications for about 12 years before I began doing the work I do now, and I have had the honor of having many, many people from that part of my life find me or circle back in now all these years later, and it's so interesting that the trust in the relationship and kind of the center of gravity that we established, even unwittingly back then, holds us now. I have a lot of people that I work with, or someone has died and they come find me and say, "Katie, I trust you. I want to do this work with you." And it's really such an honor to reconnect with people and to discover that what was created years ago was created for a reason.
Yeah, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's why, I had mentioned when my girlfriend Kim gave me your book, I was like, I had no idea because
Yeah.
I have to believe there's something so much bigger
Yeah.
than this.
Mhm.
And I attribute that to, unfortunately, to this tragedy.
Yeah, tell me about this. So there's a why, there's a story you tell, an experience you had about what really catalyzed this path and calling for you.
Yes. June 8th, 2022, Nicholas Sapio was killed, he and 4 other Marines when their Osprey helicopter crashed in a California desert during a military training mission. And I never met Nick. I only heard about him because I taught leadership classes with his mom, Sue. He called her Sue Berry, which, that just kind of gives you a sense of what his personality is like. Sue and I had a couple of conversations. I mean, we had many conversations, obviously, but 2 of them really stuck out to me. And I have permission to share these stories. So the first one was when she said, I can't find the support that I need. Now,
Mm,
this is June 2022. We're just coming out of a pandemic.
right.
And she did go through the military's TAPS program, and I believe that's the trauma awareness program for survivors. You know, the military has a program. She had used her employer's EAP, employee assistance program. She had connected with a couple of counselors, but they weren't a good fit. And if you're talking about these types of situations or anything, you want to make sure that they're a good fit for you. So she said, I can't find the support that I need. And everyone that I'm reaching out to
Mhm.
is either booking 6 months out or
Yeah.
they're not returning my call.
Yeah.
So I, that just hit me. I started to go on this mission to try to find her somebody who could give her the tools that would help her. So I'm calling my friends who I know are in therapy. Does your therapist have any openings? I started to look online for support groups and podcasts and TED Talks and articles and anything and everything that I could find. And I just kept sending her everything. And I thought she'll do with it what she wants when she wants.
Mhm.
And then one of the things that I happened upon was this certified grief coaching program. And I was like, I don't even know that's a thing. Now, I spent my career in education and I'd never heard of anything like this. And I thought, well, I'll look into it. I reached out to the founder and I said, I'm not looking to add this as certification to my counseling or therapy practice, that I just want to help my friend.
Right.
So I went through that program and that's where I became a
Mm,
certified coach. And then the second conversation that we had that was really impactful is when she said, I can't go back to work.
yes.
And again, she and I facilitated leadership programs together. I know of Nick and other family members because of all of the stories that she told. She
Right.
was a full-time professor at a local university. So that made sense to me that she's not going to be able to walk into a class and to get to that point in a lesson where this is the time that I tell this story. She's not going to be able to.
Right.
So, kudos to the university. They actually gave her a year-long project that she could work on
Mhm.
that
Yes.
didn't require her to be back on campus every single day.
Mm.
But that led me to thinking, okay, she's got this great opportunity that she can work through her grief. She's got this year-long time frame. But that's not the case for everyone. Do you have an idea of what the average bereavement leave is, Katie, for most companies?
Like 2 weeks.
3 to 5 days.
Oh, even if it's a spouse, a child?
So it oftentimes the policies are written so that it's dependent upon the relationship,
Right, right,
right?
right.
So 3 days, well, one day is usually, like for maybe a distant relationship, not friends.
Mm,
3 days is, for, maybe grandparents and whatnot, but 5 days, if you get 5 days, that's when it might be for a parent, a sibling, grandparents sometimes in their children, etc. And I got to thinking, how can that be? What if I'm closer to my cousin than I am a
right.
sibling?
That's right. Yes.
What if my uncle raised me?
Mhm.
So I started to look into this, and then I also got to thinking, like, how do you go back to work, right? So I'm going to ask you another question here. You've had two children,
Yes.
and what was your family leave time? Do you remember how much time you got off?
I was fortunate because for my first son, I worked for a university, and so I think I had 12 weeks. And
Okay.
my second son, I had my own business,
Okay.
and ironically, I had my own business and I gave myself 4 weeks. But I could flex it, et
Yes.
cetera, right?
Yeah.
But I knew I was fortunate having 12 weeks because I think most of the time it's much shorter than that.
Yeah. It's typically 6 weeks. So six to
Yes.
12 weeks is average. Think about this, and this is a really difficult concept to comprehend. I get 12 weeks, say 6 weeks. I get 6 weeks after giving birth
Mhm,
to adjust to this new life.
mhm.
If that child dies, I now get 3 days off of work, right? So, I was blown away when somebody had presented that
Mhm.
concept to me thinking that I I only get 3 days off
Right.
if my child dies. And and then, in a case like with Nick, he was in California,
Right.
right? So those 3 bereavement days, they have to do with, usually attending the service in a couple of days to, kind of, I'm doing air quotes, right? Get over it or to move on. Well, if you've got somebody who's living halfway, well, all the way across the country, because we're in New Hampshire, right? And you've got all of these investigations. I've worked with people whose children have died tragically. I won't go into
Mhm.
detail on those, but they've died tragically in other parts of the country, and they're in police investigations. They're dealing with insurance. They're dealing with all of these different things. And I'm thinking, how do people go back to work? How do they survive? How do they do this? On 3 to 5 days. So that's when, and I was working primarily with the construction industry
Mhm.
when this happened. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm operating a piece of heavy equipment and my sister just died. I'm supposed to go back and be safe operating this heavy equipment after 3 to 5 days, right? So that's when I really started to do a deep dive into how grief impacts our brains and our bodies. And when we go back to work, we're a risk.
Right.
We're a
Mhm.
safety risk if you're in a dangerous industry. You're you're putting yourself and others at risk. You're
Mhm.
also, if you're at a type of position where you're kind of sitting at a desk, doing computer work, you're still at a risk, not necessarily for safety, but for making costly errors because
Mhm.
this, Katie, that the brain, those stress chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol, they kind of hijack the feel good dopamines, and you get brain fog, and it's a real thing. So that's really what sent me on this path of
Mm.
talking to people about how grief impacts us at work. And I think that we've done a great job recently in trying to break the stigma around mental health and suicide, right? You watch sports nowadays and they've got athletes talking about taking care of your mental health and sharing their personal stories. This to me is such a breakthrough.
Mhm. Mhm.
So mental health, suicide, we're also starting to, bring awareness to substance misuse
Mhm.
and being more supportive in that area. Katie, nobody's talking about grief.
Right.
Few people. I talk about grief, right? Few people are talking about grief. And if you were to do a root cause analysis, and if you were to look at why somebody is distracted or why these mistakes happen, why people are showing up this way, why substance use is an issue, why mental health is an issue, I would venture to guess that a lot of it has to do with underlying grief,
Mhm. Mm.
right? And we don't have, if you have experienced any type of trauma, you don't have trauma without grief.
Right.
So to me, that's the foundation of so many challenges that,
Yes.
that are happening right now. And instead, what we're doing is we're kind of putting band-aids on them.
Yes.
Literally, right? We put a band-aid on it, we take a pill.
Mhm. Right.
We're not getting to the root cause.
That's right. And I agree so wholeheartedly with that premise, that idea that we're all essentially moving through a life that grieves us. And I think about grief, there's the physical experience of death, and then there's the grief that comes, you and I were speaking about this before we got on, around a divorce, around a move, around a change in career, around just a natural threshold phase of life. And I've come to really deeply regard and respect this truth as I've worked with people over the years that life is a series of deaths and rebirths. I just believe that that's the definition of life. We are here in human form, and life is a series of deaths and rebirths. And yes, there are times that those deaths are truly physical deaths of those we love. There are times that it's our own existential death. And you're right, as a culture, we have come so far from our truth and our roots around not only this being one of the gravitational forces of our human life, death and rebirth, but we've lost I think, the reverence for it. I think we've lost the community, the tribe, the tribal nature of coming together and honoring this and kind of midwifing a grief process through because on the other side of grief is always a rebirth. It's not a rebirth that often you would ask for. You would never trade your loved one for the new version of you, but grief will transform you. But we've lost so much reference for that. And when I think about indigenous cultures or tribal cultures, just cultures where we honored the heartbeat of life and the way that people came together to support each other and to honor death in all of its forms and then life in all of its forms. We're so far from that. And I love what you're doing. I think it's it's probably a pretty big mountain to climb to go into corporate settings and kind of traditional Western capitalistic settings and bring back I think it's like a natural emotional muscle memory and a spirit memory. I mean, I'm not talking about religious beliefs. I mean, like, we
Right.
are spirit. And so you're bringing that in, and I applaud the corporations and organizations that are bringing you in so that they can become more emotionally intelligent, more spiritually intelligent. This is one of the reasons that I did leave the corporate world. It was really hard for me to be part of a system that suppressed and devalued the multiverse nature of people and asked us instead to focus on productivity and the suppression of emotion and the go 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 at all costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
One of my favorite things to do, when I am doing a conference presentation or working with an organization is I like to have everybody stand up who's able, and I ask them, if you or someone you love has been impacted by mental health, suicide, substance use disorder, please sit down. And
Mhm.
then I think one time I was had a room of about 95 people and 3 young guys remained standing,
Mhm.
and I said, "All of you have been impacted. Everybody who's sitting, all of you have been impacted by grief. And
Mhm.
the 3 of you who are standing right now, you now know 100 other people who've
Mhm.
been impacted by grief."
That's right. That's
Right?
right.
Right,
Yeah.
and then, and then we kinda get into the deep dive of it, of, how it
Mhm.
impacts our brains, our bodies, etcetera.
Mhm.
And really with the message of just keep an eye out on one another, right? It's not difficult to be kind, and when you see
Mhm.
those people, they walk in and, they're just always grumpy, rather than looking at them as, why are they always so grumpy? Having some compassion.
Mhm.
And you don't need to know the why, it's not your business, but to be able to instead look at them
Mhm.
and just give them some love and give them some compassion and think, whatever happened, that this is the way you have to get through your day.
Mhm.
I'm it's like, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah. One thing I see so much with people and as you know, I've worked a lot with people who've had all kinds of loss, but definitely worked with a fair number of people who've lost spouses and children. And I hear this and see this all the time. And so when people lose someone and it leaves a gaping hole, or it doesn't make sense. Right? I think that there's like a blessing in grandma was 93. She lived a full life. She was ill toward the end. I miss her and love her, and it feels right and true that that she's crossed, right? There's a peacefulness about that.
Yes.
But when I work with people with whom there are deaths and there just isn't that same kind of peace, they will often talk about how they feel ill at ease in their own lives and no
Yes.
longer at home in places, communities, groups, relationships that they once felt at home in. I've had people, I think about some of the people I've worked with who've lost spouses who say, I can't, I'm thinking of one in particular. She's like, I can't go to girls' night anymore. Where we would go and go out to dinner and maybe we'd complain about our husbands or complain about the kids' schedules. And she's like, I did that for years. And now that my husband has died, it seems shallow and it seems beside the point, and I can't fake it. And I also feel like people don't know how to hold space for me. And I honor all of that because there's a way that when you go through a kind of loss or death that fundamentally changes you, I always say, like, you know too much. And it's really hard to fit back into a life where you weren't aware of this kind of grief, depth, pain, rawness. And in her story, and she's not alone. I've heard this story countless times. But when she says my friends didn't haven't known how to support me, or the group didn't know how to support me, but there's this one friend who could, but I've lost some other friends, or there's distance with other friends. I think that's really common too, because I think societally, we don't quite know what to do with someone who's grieving. I think it triggers us. I don't think we have a lot of experience with how to understand that someone else's pain can be triggering for us, kick up things in us. And so that's where you see a lot of people, sort of say things that those who are grieving really become offended and incensed by, like, oh, there's a reason for everything, or, God needed another angel, things like that.
Yeah.
And I understand that those things are well meaning. I also think at times people don't know what to say and they're perplexed at the heaviness of grief. And so that I see this disconnect between people who maybe want to help or don't know how to help, or who are overwhelmed, and then the person who's experiencing grief where, almost nothing is comforting that people are saying. And in fact, what I encourage them to do is go find places where you can be unabashedly deep, because you are fetal position in a well right now, lying at the bottom, feeling a rawness and a depth that you only experience if you go through something like this. You've got to find a community. You've got to find like-minded people. And I also think, and this is where you and I come in, you've got to find a compassionate witness, because being able to be with someone who can sit with you in that intense, raw space and hold and witness and not brush past the pain or try to say the band-aid thing that's going to fix, even if it's well-meaning, it's really an important part of the experience. And I think that's how you learn as someone who's grieving. It's how you learn to start to honor yourself in a new way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard from so many people that I've worked with about the mask. Having to wear that mask is
Right.
exhausting because their grief makes everybody else uncomfortable, right? And Katie, I think with the upcoming holidays, this is a really difficult time for people. I think a lot of people who've not experienced this, uh, they they may understand that the first year during the holidays could be difficult, but most people after about a month or 3 months
Mhm.
after the death, they start to fade away,
Yep.
right? Like you were saying, they don't know how to be with that person anymore. They don't know how to
Yeah.
support them. They want the old friend back. Well, that old friend is still there, but they're different. Just like, you're not the same person that you were when you were a teenager.
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So you're not the same as you
Yes.
were prior to the death. And, with the holidays and with all of those firsts, like anniversaries and
Yeah.
birthdays and whatnot, people will, people have a tendency, rightfully so, to reach out the day of,
Mhm.
right? Or maybe leading up to it. But afterwards, I checked the box, I did what I needed to do, and I go on with my life. And that's okay, as they
Mhm.
should. But that person is still there.
Yes. That's right.
And when we look at the holidays and why that can be so traumatic for people,
Mm.
you're grieving the loss of tradition, you're grieving the fact that your person, and again, this isn't just having to do with death, right? If we're talking about grief in general, but you're looking at everything that you've lost and how the future, right? Losing the future and the hope is so devastating for so many people. So it's trying to figure out, how do you support them and how do you help them honor
Mhm.
um, what they want to do? And I think that a lot of people get the pressure of, you need to be around friends and family, right?
Mhm.
You need to go to the party, with all good intention.
Yes.
And I would say you don't need to do anything.
Mhm.
Right? You need to honor yourself. And if you make a commitment to attend a holiday gathering, and if at the very last second you don't feel like going, that's okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the people who get it will understand,
Yes.
right? Because
Mhm.
it's not about them, it's about you.
Mhm.
What is it that you need?
Mhm. Right.
And just honoring that. And oftentimes, I'm sure that you've seen this too, that people don't know what they need. They don't know what to do because they're just swirling, right?
Yes.
They have that brain fog and they're just swirling. They're like, I don't know what's right.
Mhm.
So it's having that opportunity to just kind of sit
Mhm.
and process it, taking your deep breaths, meditating, if that's something that you can build into your practice, and and asking for guidance, like, should I go or not, and follow your instincts, right? And
Mhm.
I think you and I have the belief that those instincts, those gut feelings, they're given to us.
Yes. That's right. I always say to people too, I encourage them because I do work with a lot of families, and I think one of the challenges in families is that people grieve so differently.
Yeah.
Sometimes people, the way they grieve is by talking and processing. They wanna memorialize, they want to light a candle, they wanna honor the person and talk about the person. And then there are other people that for them, talking about it and having it come up a lot feels really destabilizing, and they grieve more privately. And I've witnessed so much that it can be really challenging in family systems when people grieve differently. And so I always encourage people, give each other space and room to be what you need, to do what you need to do. When I think about holidays for people, and not just the first year, but all the subsequent years too, give yourself permission to rewrite a tradition. And we know how hard that is because there's a lot of pressure in families to stick to tradition. And
Yeah.
so I'm not cavalier in how I suggest this. I understand that at times changing a tradition feels very threatening to families. But if possible, thinking about for the family, how can we pause and revisit this tradition? Do we want a stripped down version of it this year? Do we want to, add something? I think also when I think about an individual person, you are allowed to say, this Thanksgiving, this Hanukkah, this Christmas, I just need to not put the tree up or not go to that gathering. And it doesn't mean that for the rest of your life, you won't do the thing. It just means that right now, this is what's important and necessary for you. And you're right. There are people who will understand this and honor it and support you, and there are people who will not. And that is really, really difficult when people don't support it, and pressure each other. It's one of the things that I really encourage people when I'm working with them on grief is like, grief will slow you down and it will teach you the excruciating lessons of endurance and patience. And if we can extend that to people who are grieving, that is such a gift because it is hard to know what to do. And it's hard to know what to say. And a lot of times you don't want to say and do the wrong thing. But understanding that if you can meet a person and do like one gentle, safe step at a time. What do you need? How can I best support you? And sometimes that's providing cover. Or sometimes that's I suggest this to people a lot. If you can have just one person who sees eye to eye with you and understands, have them come with you to the gathering. And if you need to pull the plug, that person is cover and that person, steps in and says, I'm taking so and so home. Like you it can feel really difficult and excruciating to have to figure out how to get your needs met. But there are people who will help you, and there are people who you can trust to do this with you and journey this way with you. Hey there. I just want to pop in real quick to invite you to an upcoming ceremony on Friday, November 28th, 2025 at 11 a.m. Eastern. Over at the Intrepid Soul Collective, I will be hosting a ceremony for peace. And during that ceremony, we'll come together and anchor the energy and the frequency of peace in our own bodies, and then anchor that frequency in ourselves as a group, and then offer that frequency to the world. I think you agree that we're living in tumultuous times, and that holding an energy of peace and love is incredibly valuable. So I hope you join me at the Intrepid Soul Collective on Friday, November 28th, 2025 at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you can't join me live, don't worry. You can join the replay, and you won't miss the group energy of it, because after we've done this, we've created a psychic footprint that exists forever. And so if you re-listen to the ceremony, you'll contribute to what we've created. I hope to see you there.
Yeah, I love the idea of having a friend with you or having somebody with you
Mhm.
who understands that, almost that safe word. I need to
Mhm.
go and I need to go now. So having an exit plan, and that's for anything.
Mhm.
And with that exit plan, it's literally knowing, how do I get out of here?
Yes.
Right. And making sure that you park in a place that you can leave.
Yes.
Right.
Right,
And
right.
knowing right?
You don't have, like, 5 people have to move their cars. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I had a birthday party this this year, and I did it as a fundraiser.
Mhm.
And for two organizations, Girls at Work in Manchester, they work with young women, teenage girls mostly, giving them leadership skills and putting power tools in their hands, right? It's such
Mhm.
an awesome organization. So I hosted it there. I'm a donor, so I got to host it there. And then I also supported the Friends of Anya Center for Grieving Children. And at this event, I had a couple girlfriends from high school there, and one of them approached me and she said, "Is there a place where I can take our friend?" Because the anxiety of
Mhm.
being in a big room with so many people
Mhm.
was starting to overwhelm her.
Mhm. Right.
And and I'm thinking this, I look at everything from the standpoint of like, wow, this is really interesting, right? So of course I put her in that, found a room where she could go. But I got to thinking, this is such a joyous event, right? And we're
Mhm.
having fun. There's no pressure. We're just eating and laughing and whatnot. And yet somebody experiences stress out of that.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I'm like, okay, so it's not, I think about the people that have situations like that. I think about others who could be in a room with 100 people
Mhm.
and feel lonely.
Yes.
Right. So having that escape route is
Mhm.
really important, knowing what it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. And, I think of other people that could have been in situations like that where it could have been like, oh, you know what, just, she'll be fine. It's like, you know what,
Mm-mm.
if she needs to leave, let her leave. And it's okay. I'm not going to be offended by it. Right. Because in that situation, yes, it's my birthday party,
Mhm.
but that situation, that was not about me.
That's right. That's
Right.
right.
And that's where I think trying to get trying to get people to understand that it's not about you. I'll just tell a quick story here. I was working with a woman and she said, "My mother-in-law is just always so depressed. Her father-in-law had died. They've been married, 50 some odd years. And
Mhm.
she's like, when is she ever going to get over it? I don't even want to go over there anymore." She's like, I, I am dreading the holidays because she's going to be sad and the holidays are supposed to be joyous. So how am I supposed to go over there and deal with this? Like, when is she going to get over this? It's like, well, how long is her husband going to be dead?
Right. Right.
Right. And, and again, it's not about you. Right. So instead of, I don't want to go there because it's going to be sad and depressing for me, looking at it as, what can I do to go over there to be of support and to help her memorialize, to help her give her options and talk through some of what those options are and how it is that she wants to honor her husband
Mhm. Mhm.
or not,
Right. That's right.
right? It's always adding in that or not.
Yes. Right. Because sometimes people don't want to go there. And I think this is really tricky when you have a death in a family where there are multiple people deeply impacted, where you have someone who's grieving a certain way or in a certain state. And then, so I think about, for instance, like mom loses her husband and the three kids lose their father and the grandkids lose their grandfather. Right. So you have a whole system of people in their own ways, processing in their own ways, needing different things, coming together or intending to come together around a holiday, for instance. And sometimes I think and I've seen this so much, it can be really hard for families to figure out, well, what do we do? Because what works for some may not work for all. And this is where I do think that when you're open to the grieving process, and it is excruciating, and you will endure and you will learn a measure of patience that you never wanted to learn, but that grieving will help us grow and become more emotionally mature. And what I mean by that is, like you said, sort of minding that trigger of, okay, mom is a mess. Mom mom is fetal position, can't function. That triggers my grief. I'm I've compartmentalized a bit. I've got work, I've got kids, I've got to move through. That's triggering me. It's really hard for me to touch down in that rawness and that depth and that utter pain because I actually have that pain too. But my way of dealing with the pain is that I drop in when I'm able to because otherwise it feels like it's destabilizing. And I work with people where they have these kind of competing needs, right? And it's really tricky because it's not one person's right and one person's wrong. It's how do we meet the needs and how do we honor the boundaries? And I do think that this is one of the things that happens in death and grief is like families' lack of boundaries and lack of boundary respect. And I think most of us really struggle with truly respecting boundaries and respecting what other people need. But this is the stuff that you start to learn and start to get into. And so I always say to people, can you honor and acknowledge what you need? And so for when I think about mom who is, you know, in the depths of her grief and she's like, I can't even get off the couch.
Mm,
And then I think about, the adult child who's like, I need to keep marching through because my kids believe in Santa and we've got to pull this together for them. I ask those people, what do you need? And how can you amend the celebration or the gathering to go get what you need? Do you need to go have some time? And do you need to let everybody know, I'm going to step out at times and it's just what I need? Or, when I think about that adult child who's saying, I'm trying to balance the kids who believe in Santa. I'm actually devastated. I'm afraid if I show it, I'll never recover. How does that person need to navigate this? And it's so, so tricky. And I think appreciating that it's tricky and appreciating that if you're willing, the skills, the interrelational, interdependent skills you can develop can ultimately strengthen and transform relationships and families. And that's sort of like something you get later. It's not immediate gratification, but there is an emotional rawness. There is death is intimate. And if we can turn toward that intimacy, remember, like, vulnerability is central to intimacy. If we can turn toward it and work with it, even if it's messy, if we can tell a truth, even if we're confused or unsure, it it takes us one step closer to moving through a profoundly disorienting experience and coming to a place where we have greater understanding and depth of connection.
Yeah, it's all very confusing, and, like, and we were talking about it, Katie, that unless you're in it, you
Mhm.
don't get it,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that can be one of the challenges.
Yes.
Y
And it's okay. I say to people, when you go through something like this, you will not be understood by everyone, and it's okay. And allowing yourself to move on and say, part of this grief, I mean, I think this is what's so challenging about death and grief is, like, there's usually, like, a series of deaths that come out of it, because when you lose someone, a version of you dies too.
Yeah,
And then usually you lose some relationships because people don't know what to do with you. And so there's almost like a successive series of deaths and griefs that you go through, and it's just so incredibly hard, isn't it? And it feels so trite to say to people, like, "Endure and keep going." I say that in a really sacred way, that when you acknowledge what you need and you let go of what isn't helping or what isn't meeting you in that depth, what will appear are people, relationships, opportunities, connections that do meet you in that depth.
yeah, I think it's really important for people to understand that, it's okay to not be okay
Yes.
and to honor that.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Most people aren't okay.
Katie, we're talking about this, and my mom passed earlier
Mm.
this year.
Mhm.
Yeah, she had Alzheimer's. So this is one of those situations that we talked about where, she lived a full life. She had Alzheimer's. I was grateful to know that she took her last breath because
Mhm.
I didn't feel that she deserved to live with that. Just kind of a side story here.
Mm.
And I am going to throw out my dates here. So I turned 60 on March 9th,
Okay.
right? Nick's birthday is March 10th.
Wow.
Nick is the person that I do all of this work. Everything I
Mhm.
do is in honor of Nick. Again, a man I've never met. Okay.
Mhm.
My mom's last breath, March 10th.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that I mean, I just think that's amazing. I actually feel that she was in both worlds on my birthday,
Yes. Yes,
right?
yes. Mhm.
I had no doubt. I really wanted to be here when she took her last breath. I didn't have that opportunity, and I'm like, okay, she didn't want me to,
Yeah.
and I get that.
Yep.
But I can't help but think that there's something there, right? How it something is aligning, right?
Yeah.
So this is the first year that we're going to have the holidays without my mom. And
Mm.
for us, the holidays haven't been like a really big thing for us. So my husband and I will come to Vermont and, have Thanksgiving with my parents. Christmas, we would prefer to kind of hang out at home together, but, we'll go and see family and do whatnot. But this is the first year that my dad's going to have
Mm.
without his wife.
Right.
And what's interesting is back in August, he started asking about what are we going to do for
Mhm.
Thanksgiving?
Right.
And it's been something that's really stressful for him. It was never a big deal to him before, but this year it is. So it's like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Right. So, just trying to keep that conversation going. Katie, they were married for 66 years. Can you
Wow.
imagine? And they knew each other for 80.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. And
Yeah.
that co-regulation, right? Like, he's asking what's gonna happen on Thanksgiving, and you know this and I know this. You may say, "Okay, let's rough out a plan," and then that morning of, he may say, "I don't know, I just need to go for a drive," or "Let's go visit her grave," or, "I don't know, let's go out to eat, I can't
Yeah.
be in the house."
Yeah.
And that ability to pinch hit is really powerful and
Yeah.
important because sometimes you don't know. I mean, many times you don't know what you need. So many of us don't know what we need, especially when we go through something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You brought up, so I love the dates. Your birthday, Nick, Nick's birthday. Nick is this, like, leader and inspired muse, and then your mother's death all happening within, different years, but within the same time period. And one of the things that and this makes me smile and it makes me laugh. One of the overarching themes in all of the work I've done. So for like 10 years, I would say I did readings, psychic and mediumship readings. I had a 2-year wait list. It was back to back to back to back to back all the time, worked with people all over the world. And in the last 5 years, I really shifted to doing like more like psychic coaching work, like really journeying with people through profound transitions, deaths, etc. But when I was sort of in reading mode and having conversation after conversation, one of the overarching themes is the way that those on the other side love themselves a holiday. They love themselves a family gathering. They love the traditions. And it is one of the most accessible ways that loved ones on the other side can reach you is when and let me say this, you don't have to do the same thing you used to do. So I don't want anyone to think like, well, grandma won't come through if we don't make the same pie every year. That's
Yeah.
no, no, no. But they love this stuff. They love it when there's groups gathered. They love it when you're pausing and you're opening. And even if that opening is crying or feeling sad or feeling confused, if that opening is stillness and reflection, if it's a celebration of life, they love this stuff. And so I always say to people, as you come into holidays or traditions, just times when there was some kind of event or tradition or demarcation, your loved ones on the other side really love to interact with you during these times and show up. And so I think it's really interesting, your mother's death and your birthday and Nick's birthday. And I really see that as a confirmation from the other side that you're spot on
Yeah.
and that you're not alone. And I also see it as confirmation that you never met Nick in his waking living life, but you certainly know him now and he certainly knows you. And so there's no way that he is not one of your guides. So I also see your mother's death between your birthday and his birthday as a sign that he was there to help move her through and move her across.
Yeah.
Numbers and dates and synchronicities like that are not an accident. This is how the unseen world talks to us and gets our attention. And if we're open to it, the unseen world wants to deeply comfort us.
Yeah. I have no doubt. Thank you for that insight, Katie. You've been much more experienced in this world than I have. In this understanding. I mean, I'm maybe 3 years with these understandings. Can I tell a real quick story about signs? Right. So again, Nick's accident was in June. I started taking the grief coaching program in October. It ended in December. In January, I'm in Florida visiting my father-in-law, and I I was never one to listen to podcasts. I didn't get them, but I found one and I started to listen to this one podcast. I just randomly selected one guest. And this guest happened to be talking about, can I drop a name? Is that okay?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the podcast is We Don't Die
Okay.
with Sandra Champlain,
Mhm.
and her guest is Brian Smith. Brian was talking about signs. Brian's daughter had died, Shayna had died, and he was talking about signs and he was saying, you need to ask specific things to get a sign, right? And
Mhm.
I'm listening and I'm fascinated, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking a walk around this community in Florida. And I'm like, okay, let's give it a try. So I was like, Nick, I need you to land on a flagpole as an osprey. Now, they're near lakes. So there's ospreys flying over, there's eagles flying over, right? But where I was a little bit more inland. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, so this is going to be a challenge because the ospreys don't usually fly this close or, this far inland. So I need you to kind of land on that flagpole for me, right? And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous, right? And I think the neighbors must be thinking, who is this woman who's just kind of standing at the corner in this neighborhood, like looking up at the sky and walking around and kind of walking back and forth. And finally, it's like, okay, well, you know what? I gave it a try. Okay. Katie, I turned the corner and there's a flag. And now I'm looking for a flying osprey to
Right.
land, right? No, I walk around the corner and there is a flagpole with the top that is usually a ball or an
Mhm.
eagle. It might be a military symbol. It's an osprey.
Mhm. Right.
I was absolutely blown away. I was like, are
Mhm.
you kidding me? Right.
Yes.
And I, of course, ran home. I got my husband. I was like, okay, you're going to think I'm nuts, but I need you to come with me and I need you to tell me what kind of bird is on that flagpole. Is it not an
Mhm.
eagle? It's not a hawk. Like, what is that? And he's, oh, it looks like an osprey. So I told him the story. I was like, this is crazy. And I was like,
Mhm.
thank you, Nick. Like,
Mhm.
thank you for that affirmation.
And you know what I love about that though is so I don't usually advise people to be specific because I think the other side wants us to give up some of our humanness.
Yeah.
I think it wants us to lay down control. So what I love, and this is what the other side does, what I love about what Nick did is he's like, I know how you're asking for this and I know what you're thinking, but I'm going to do it in a different way to remind you that like I'm in control.
Yes. 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 100%. 100%. Yeah.
So the other side will always find a way to remind us that there's something much bigger going on. I actually really love this, the way that the other side does it, because I hear those stories all the time where or so I'll have people on the other side say to a client who's in front of me, okay, yeah, so birds are going to be a sign, birds are going to be a signal, but don't just look for birds that are flying around. Look for a bird that is a pin or in a children's coloring book or a bird where you would least expect it. Like there's ways that they connect with us that remind us, hey, there's something bigger. And our views as humans they're really narrow. They're really, really narrow. And so when I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people like, I was looking for a sign and oh my gosh, this was hysterical. I have this client and she had traveled to the West Coast in a really sort of curious and meaningful way, like looking for just general signs about like what are her next steps and should she move to the West Coast and so she had come to this big beach. I think that she was in Washington State because it was like one of those big beaches with the big boulders and it's gray and rainy and misty. And she had said at the start of her day, just show me something yellow if I'm meant to continue pursuing moving out here. And then she was just open, right?
Yeah.
So she's on this beach, gray, dreary, boulders, gray ocean, gray sky. And among all of these gray stones is a yellow stone, not painted. We actually looked it up and I can't remember what kind it is, but it's a certain kind of stone that when it gets wet, it turns yellow. And then when
Wow.
it dries, it it changes color back to whatever its main color is. And she picked it up and she brought it in my office and we sort of, we dumped water over to my office for her to show me the yellow. And I said, so this is a classic way they show us that they're listening and that we're not alone is like, yes, I'm going to meet you in your request for something yellow, but it's not yellow all the time. And it's yellow when it's wet. And when it's not yellow, like, so we sort of mind that for all of the messages and all of the nuances and understood that sign is something much more complex and nuanced than yes, you're meant to figure out how to move out here. And I love the way the other side does that. And I think that when you are able to get there, and I think sometimes it's like one fleeting moment at a time, but death is a catalyzing event. Grief is a catalyzing process that is fundamentally meant to make you and me remember that there is something much bigger going on, that we are spirit, that we are souls, that perhaps people we love don't die, they just change shape or form. And when you are in the throes of grief, this doesn't feel very comforting. And then there's moments where you sort of get a gulp of that oxygen and it starts to feel better and it starts to make sense. I've seen grief and death transform people into powerful, inspirational, thoughtful stewards of humanity. I've seen the best of people emerge on the heels of death and grief. And they'll say, I wouldn't have traded my loved one's life for this, but I now know who I am. I now know what I'm supposed to do for humanity. I think Nick's death did this for you. And I know you didn't know Nick personally, but look at what happened. Look at what his death did for you, the way it catalyzed action, clarity, purpose, and how many people you're helping because of this. Death is such a deep and powerful catalyst that propels us further towards our souls.
Yeah, 100%. This was not a goal of mine,
Right.
right? It's something that happened. I mean, I left what I refer to as, my paycheck job, my insurance. I left all of that. I left that security, right? I left, a community. I left so much behind, and I'm so grateful that I did. I wish the circumstances that propelled me into this new adventure never happened, but they did. And
Right.
I'm going to continue to honor that. Nick is constantly nudging me, and I've become so much more open to understanding that, things will happen, and I may not always like them, but it's like,
Yeah.
okay, he and others are there guiding me, keeping me safe, giving me guidance. And I don't, you know, I like I had said previously, I don't know how to communicate with them. I just now am trusting my instincts much more than I ever had.
Yes.
And, with that, I feel that I I I think that that's just part of what I'm supposed to be doing. Whatever that is. I don't have a big plan for what this work is. I just of course I have to, from a business standpoint, right? You get this, we have to have some kind of a plan. We have to have some ideas, and I'm working on that, but things
Yeah.
just keep falling onto my lap, as they say, right? I'm getting accepted to present at conferences. I'm getting invited to meet with companies. And then after those meetings, individuals will contact me, and, we have these consultations. And I, I can't tell you how many people, and Katie, I know you've experienced this. I might have a 5 minute or 20-minute conversation with somebody after doing a speaking engagement, and that helps.
Mhm.
It's like I feel better. One of the presentations that I just did recently, just off the top of my head, or somebody gave it to me, I was like, I'm going to get sticky notes and I'm going to ask everybody who comes into this presentation. It was on grief as a hidden safety risk. And I said, write, if you've lost somebody, write the name of your loved ones on the sticky note or on a sticky note. And we put them on a wall. Somebody wrote their dog, right? Because it's not just right. So, um, and this one woman said to me afterwards, she said, just writing their name was a release.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so if we can give just that one moment of a little bit of a release to acknowledge um, and just take a breath and relax and to be able to be real in that space without having to wear the mask. You know, this one presentation, I'd never had this happen before. I had probably about a half a dozen people in tears. And it wasn't I wasn't doing anything to put them into tears. They just felt that it was a safe space to release. And everybody else in that room was also like, and this is at a conference, at a
Yeah.
safety conference where you
Right.
wouldn't expect, people are much more reserved. It
Mhm.
was it was so powerful. And
Yeah.
we talked about some of those things to do, during the holidays and some of the practical things that that I would advise people is if you're if you're sending a card, look at the card that you're sending, especially if it's a Christmas card. These holiday cards, they are filled with joy and merriment and all of these beautiful sayings. Find a card that has a blank inside with a nice picture or something that might resonate and write a handwritten note. If you can give something to someone else, that can be very powerful. And if there's any other way, any support or resources that I can provide, that's what I feel that my mission is right now, or as I refer to it as my compassionate calling. And I do it all in honor of Nick, and I know that he's up there with my mom, my two best friends, Betty and Becky.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's really beautiful. Jen, thank you so much for sharing and being here. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Katie, and I appreciate you, and I am so excited that we had this opportunity
Me
to chat.
too. Me too. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. Hi there. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. In honor of all of you who are experiencing grief during the holidays, I want you to know that at the Intrepid Soul Collective, I have a variety of supports and resources for you, including grief ceremonies that I've done in years past and other guided meditations that help you connect with loved ones on the other side. And specifically, I've created a remembrance post. It's really powerful when we name, say out loud, honor what and who we are grieving. And so over at the collective, I have a post and I invite you to tell me who you're grieving, what you're grieving this holiday season. Write that person's name and a memory about them, or maybe you're grieving something about you, a death of a version of you, or something that's changed in your life that can't ever go back to the way it was. Remember, it's not just about grieving people. We grieve all kinds of losses in our life. And so I'm curious and open and ready to hear what you have to say and share. So join me at the collective and share what you're grieving this holiday season. I'm here to hear that, honor that, and love you for that. Thank you for joining me here on the Intrepid Soul podcast. If you'd like to continue the conversation and the work of your soul, join me over on Patreon at the Intrepid Soul Collective. There you'll find tons of resources and support connected to the conversations we have here to help you make your soul work practical and embodied. There are live sessions with me, bonus Q&As where you can go deeper with me and my guests, companion guided meditations and ceremonies, and so much more. Because we can't just talk about it, we've got to become it. Check out the show notes for details and links, and hit follow on this podcast. It'll keep new episodes at the top of your feed, and it helps me build the Intrepid Soul community. Until next time, take good care of yourself and your soul.